About 10 years ago I had quite a major shift in my life, professionally and personally, and suddenly found myself with quite a bit of time on my hand, having worked almost from the day I left school. And I've been carrying a story around in my head for quite a while. I never had the time or the knowledge really of knowing what to do with it or how to do it. And with this time on my hand, I just thought, well, I'll give it a go. And really the first self-published book, which was titled Yesterday's Flight, was born. I had no idea what to do with it after I'd written the manuscript, but I found a company that would put it through self-publishing, which is the route I decided to take. And it became an Amazon genre bestseller, and really that's kind of how I fell into it, I guess. There are ideas really where it's things that I'd like to read or watch, rather than things that are like finding a gap in the market, for instance. Yesterday's Flight, which was the first book I wrote, was sort of ideas that spawned from watching programs like The Outer Limits, The Twilight Zone, and programs like that really. So that's where they come from. It's things that I personally want to see that aren't there, that don't exist, rather than filling a gap in the market. I tend to write as if I'm visualising it on screen. So when you read my books, hopefully they'll kind of play in your head as a movie, rather than more so than a piece of literature. Probably very differently to most writers. I know quite a few writers, and they're all sort of trained writers. I'm not. I haven't really had any formal training in it. I've kind of learnt as I've gone along, with advice and reading other people's work and things on how to approach it. So most writers will plan in great detail. They'll make mountains of notes, and they'll sort of know all the plot points along. Personally, I tend to write very organically. I do things almost the wrong way around. I don't mean I start at the end and right back to the beginning. Once I've got the characters established, once I've got the basic plot in my mind and certain events that I want to take place, I then write very organically between those events, so that it develops in the way that actual real life would develop, rather than having particular plot points and particular points to get to, if you like. I don't have a roadmap, which a lot of writers use. I think for a writer, kudos comes with being published, because it's almost someone's accepting your work and validating it. But with self-publishing, you get a lot more control, you have a lot more control over it. So there's a lot of, I think the term that's banded around is hybrid writers, such as myself, who are both published and self-published. So for one of my titles, which was Devolution of a Species, I did get publishing offers for that, but none of them really sat within what I would call acceptable publishing terms. So the offers I got through weren't things that I was willing to accept. There was too much control taken away, too many compromises, I think, to the original story needed to be made. And so I rejected the publishing offers that I got for it and went self-publishing with that one. So I think you've got to take each book as it comes, as to whether it suits being published or self-published, depending upon the subject matter. I'm working on a manuscript that I've been working on for the last 3 years with a published writer over in Los Angeles called Stephen Stifel. That's going to be getting sent out to agents and publishers pretty soon. That's called Tomorrow's Flight, and that's a complete rewrite of the first book that I did, Yesterday's Flight, which is no longer available. And we're also working on a TV pilot as well, which I think we're going to be close to completing towards the middle of this year, and then again we'll be pitching that around LA and Hollywood and other production companies to see if we can get it picked up. And then I'm going to be starting to write a prequel to Thurston Field Halt, and then a sequel, so that's a 3-book collection. Music mainly. I like to listen to music, movies, certain TV shows. I'm not a binge watcher of television. I don't have it on for the sake of having it on, but there are certain shows that I really do enjoy. I look for good writing and good plots, But yeah, other than that, it's mainly the music. Learn as much as you can and don't give up. At one point, I sold one of my cars so that I could employ a former editor of. Well, I say one of my cars, it was the only car I had. So I ended up seconding my daughter's car for quite a while. But it was so that I could employ an editor of Stephen King's, a former editor of Stephen King's, because I really wanted to see how far apart I was, what the gulf was between what I'd produced and what would be, expected before you started approaching literary agents. So be prepared for the sacrifices. Most writers are not rich. Most writers do it for the craft and for the love. So just don't give up, and if it's something you really want to pursue, be prepared to put a lot of hard work in and also to make a few sacrifices along the way, because you're going to need to.